Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Welcome to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard, along with your host, Bill Stierle. And, Bill, last time we talked about truth and the police, and,
yes.
There's just so much happening here on a daily and almost weekly basis regarding this subject. And, there's more to talk about that's very relevant today in our society. And the clear, obvious one that I think we need to address is what's happened in Atlanta recently with Rayshard Brooks, who was, by all reports, was asleep in his car in a drive-thru at a Wendy's, fast food restaurant. And somebody apparently from within the establishment, the Wendy's restaurant, called the police because it's disruptive. This car's not moving through the drive-through line. And of course, most people are getting takeout through drive-through now because of COVID-19. Mm-hmm. And the police intervene, and for 45, just to recap this in case somebody doesn't understand the details, for about 45 minutes, they're assessing this man, woke him up, talking to him, trying to decide if he just fell asleep or is he intoxicated or, what's going on. And they suspect that he's intoxicated after talking with them, and then proceed to try to arrest him. And then things go south in a hurry when he resists arrest.
Yeah, so there's a lot there, Tom.
Oh, my gosh.
There's a lot here. So the first step, to really approach something like this is to slow down and feel sad.
Oh, yes.
Disheartened. Just the grief of the loss of life of a young person who has young kids at home and was struggling with drugs. I watched a lot of the footage, and the hardest thing to get the brain to do is to make sure that we don't equally proportionalize the loss, and then you lose the action that the police took to try to get safety and protection for the environment, but you make sure that action is both not lost, but also not scaled to the level of the loss of life. The loss of life has got to remain like 9 and 10 on the list. And you don't want to minimalize all the work that the police were doing right before the handcuffing. Because the handcuffing, that's when the triggering of the brain took place inside the young man, as well as inside the police. They immediately all shifted to a fight response. All of them shifted to a fight response, which is this surge of adrenaline, cortisol. There's weapons around. There's going to be dangerous. We're going to tase the guy. We're going to, all of those police policing, protective, restraining, the years of practice and focus is there, and it then escalates to, suppress and rise to, we're trying to protect and following our safety protocols, and we're going to secure the environment because this person is, fighting, and we might get hurt, or somebody else might get hurt. It's now, is the person on drugs lethal to another person? Now, that is not the way it's talked about or things, but if he goes running into a street and he runs, I'm doing an if then, and then that car swerves and then hits another car and kills somebody in that car, all of a sudden we're talking about the police not restraining him properly. See, it's very, very, and that's why the sadness comes up. Is the sadness is that the situation, the dynamics happening at this time, it's what needs to really take place, to protect him. And we can watch different police being in a place of rationale, describing what the two officers should have done. What should they have done? Oh, let him run. Set up a net around that area. Call in for reinforcement. Catch the guy. You have the guy's car. All of those things are beyond what the limbic protective brain is doing in that moment. It's into, here's my training. Here's what protection looks like. Here's what safety looks like. Here's what the good of the public looks like. This is my job as a police department. And this is what I've been trained to do. So I know I've kind of laid an entire pushback to take place, but I want to get early in our conversation about how sad and helpless and disheartened and people feel around this, and to make sure that we're proportionalizing the loss of those children are growing up with their father dying on that day, with the drug use and and all those things that went with our current society that is struggling on multiple levels. So it's really tough to get a hold of truth, because you and I are we're like white guys. We don't know. We're like outside of this. Every day I see the range of, hey, we're getting, getting scared every day, and we're feeling more and more, scared and helpless by this group of people called police because of this color of our skin. And that's kind of like, a large truth of the matter, of it. So,
well, definitely. So
anyway.
Bill, I agree with that. And I really appreciate your helping to cast some perspective on this, because to me, the word that comes up with this whole situation repeatedly is tragic. It is tragic that this man's life has been lost. It should not have been lost, and it did not deserve to be taken away. At least, I mean, obviously there's an investigation and all sorts of things that, we're not there at the time. Everybody is from the outside looking in at all the cell phone videos that were taken and everything. But it certainly seems very clear from just the observational evidence that, I mean, did he do something wrong? Yes. Did the police, were they called in appropriately? It sure appears that way, that they were called in appropriately, and that they were doing a good job there for about 43 minutes, assessing the situation, not rushing to judgment, trying to make sure. And here's the thing. You're right, Bill. I mean, had they given him a warning and just said, okay, go home and sleep it off, and let this person who, I mean, I believe they gave him a breathalyzer and he actually was over the legal limit in some way for some substance. And had they let him drive home and he crashed into somebody's car and killed somebody, they would have been negligent.
Yep.
And so they had to, they took appropriate action and doing their jobs in the beginning of this situation. Yeah. But then, like you were started saying, when they say, okay, we're going to arrest you, and they turn around and start to put the cuffs on, he gets into this, fight, flight, or freeze type of, mindset in his brain. And he fears the police. He fears getting arrested, the consequences of all of this. And maybe he isn't even thinking clearly because he is, impaired.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And he struggles and fights them and runs. And the other tragic part of this, and believe me, listeners, like I said, he did not deserve to die. And that police officer pulling his gun and shooting him, even if he had been fired at by his own taser by Rayshard Brooks still did not deserve to die for this. Okay. But had Rayshard Brooks just accepted that he was going to be arrested and not resisted arrest, he would be alive today.
And that's the expectation people have, that the brain, even if the people believe that the front part of the brain can override the back part of the brain, it just doesn't have the bandwidth to do it. And it's like when you're in a fight, flight, and freeze response, your body is locked up into and clicking into that moment. And under a drug influence, the drugs are just really messing with the front part of the brain anyways. And it's not like that our society isn't having trouble with drugs right now to an extreme place because of the amount of loss or helplessness that's in the environment. And the trauma is being transferred from person to person to person. I mean, to get a hold of this, Tom, is that the Wendy's got burned down.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
The Wendy's got burned down. That's a transfer of trauma. Let me show you how that one works, because the truth is that if our society does not face trauma, the trauma gets transferred into, we're not going to feel helpless and hopeless anymore. And anything that reminds us of trauma, it's going. The statues are coming down. People are pulling those things down, and then the people are going like, well, we're not sure if we want this thing down, and cities, mayors are going like, we better pull these things down, and they're getting pulled down and trashed. Tom, have you ever driven by a place where there was a solid memory in your head and it brings the memory back? Like, I remember that place and it was I had a happy thing there, or there was a corner where, in high school I drove by that, and that brings back that memory.
Of course. Yes.
Great. Yeah. Does that community want to drive by that Wendy's ever again?
No.
That's the transfer of trauma. I don't want to be traumatized by thinking about a police officer shooting somebody in the neighborhood because of that situation. That place has got to go. We've got to do a better job of caring for our communities, not traumatizing our communities. We've got to do a better job of providing moments of hope, of progress, of the ability to get out of things, not say, well, hey, you're making this job and there's no way out and there's no future, showing up. It's literally a life or death thing that people are facing in these traumatized environments.
Well, and interestingly, Bill, so what you're getting at there is a little bit of this call to defund the police, which that phrase, I think, as we've mentioned a little bit in the previous episode, is an unfortunate, I think, choice of words, and that phrase, defund the police, because it's sticking, but it has so many different ways that I think that it was intended to be one way and it's interpreted so many different ways to be like, oh, we're not going to have police anymore. And originally that was not really the intent. It was that, hey, let's redistribute some of the funds we are putting to policing and distribute it to places where it can be more effective at trying to help society with these issues that end up resulting in the need for police to do something that maybe they're not really well suited to do.
Well, I'm so glad you brought up the term, because, you put that right here in the environment, and, the escalation of defund police, that brand message, because we are as a society pounded with branding and advertising over the internet in microseconds now, that, can I just get an impression in and distract somebody's attention so they buy my thing? It gets to be escalated in a way that's not in proportion. Therefore, truth is getting hijacked about defund means let go of the whole thing. It's like there are plenty of ways to reallocate money, and I can't imagine a sign that says reallocate the money for the police versus defund the police, and which one's going to stick. And just like the famous drain the swamp is to get rid of swampy people in, Washington, D.C., instead of saying drain the swamp, it changes to get rid of the lobbyist.
Sure.
That's where the swamp is.
Well, no,
if you want to know where the swamp is, that's where the alligators are, is over there with the lobbyists. It's not with the politician that, is taking the money. It's with the lobbyists. Those are the swamp creatures. So the need for truth is really tough, because this is a communication show, right? It's like, how do we human beings use communication language and how it interacts with the brain and society, and how different needs get activated. And we're expecting way too much from the police. We're expecting them to be social service. We're expecting them to know the right thing to say and do to somebody that's intoxicated. See, when he's getting handcuffed, I have a fantasy. I have a thought in my head, language-wise, that there was one word that was out of place that activated his mind to fight the police. Come on, you're coming with us. No, I don't want to come with you at all. And in his mind, it might be, I need to get home to take care of my kids. My wife, girlfriend, whatever, I don't know if he's married or not, is waiting, waiting home for me. I'm going to get in big trouble if I go to jail. I don't have the money if I go to jail. See, there's a lot of triggering responses that puts that young man into a fight response. He is a young person. Is it 27 or 23?
He's 27 years old.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
No, it's horrible. I mean, he's a youngster. I mean, he's got his whole life ahead of him. And that's why it's terribly tragic, like I said. And I mean, certainly we can Monday morning quarterback this whole scene at the Wendy's, in the Wendy's parking lot, and say, well, an officer with compassion and empathy might have said, all right, let's park your car over here. Let's park your car in the Wendy's lot. Let's take you home, go home and sleep it off and come back and get your car tomorrow. That's something they could have done. But police have a hard time overlooking that here's a man intoxicated behind the wheel of a car, and that is technically a crime, right? Or the training, the interpersonal training of de-escalation, and I believe that even if I remember right, the officer that shot a person actually had a training recently about this, and they were coming off of it, and the fight response, the policeman's need for respect or safety, or even, I mean, this guy got away from 2 police officers and took their taser, right?
And is it a life-threatening weapon? No, it's not. But it's also, how did this person get this away from him? The fight response, all 3 of those men were fighting each other, and it clicked to the young man's need for freedom, survival, protection that was in the action is, I got to get away from these guys because I don't know what's going to happen to me, and or whatever baggage is in his brain about interactions with the police, or judgments inside his mind about how much trouble he was going to be in. Whatever the word
it could have been, how much trouble, how much it's going to cost,
finance,
that he's,
I'm going to jail,
right?
It's better to run than it is I could possibly get away.
But then think about the 2 police officers that all of a sudden have this calm and civil, let's say, situation turn on them, and they're struggling to contain this person who's fighting against them, and they were overpowered by this guy who is in this fight flight mode, and they were unable to contain him. He actually gets away from them, and that just ratcheted up their mindset and their tension, and I agree with their need for respect was not met, Bill. That's an important one that plays in here. But I think also at some point their need for safety was threatened by him taking the taser and pointing it at them. Now, I think we can, all of us who look at the video and see what was happening here, can think with a clear mind, obviously not in the heat of the moment, say, hey, they would either had to do it the hard way, run after him and tackle him and overpower him, or call for backup and eventually, or just let the guy run. Let him get away.
Neither of us are in both positions.
Correct.
Neither of us have experience as police officers, and the number of conflicts that they run into on a daily basis, and the level of, and it's not like the police have a great track record about their own personal life and home life. It's really, really hard to hold and maintain the line of mental health on their side. And then on the other side, you and I are not in the place of being a 27-year-old with 3 or 4 kids at home, that I might go to jail, and now I'm in this another level of trouble with no money or no whatever the things. Now all of a sudden I'm in that quagmire of not being able to get out, and not having enough money to get out, or the experience of being another person in jail, from my community, and the reflection on whatever is going on in this experience is very, very hard for us, you and I. And this is the scary honesty that you and I often deal with, is that the amount of experiences both of those 2 people, 3 people are going through is escalated to the place. And can communication make a difference? And the answer is, yeah, actually it can. Yeah. Can we communicate with ourselves going like, okay, what's the level of safety and danger that this guy that's running away from us is really going to have in the environment? And what is my plan B? Call in for backup. Yes, it didn't go well. Yeah, he shot a taser at me. Yes, he's going to have to also pay for that, because, it's because all of a sudden it's like, your drug brain did some things here, and your drug brain, you got to get some help on that. You've got to work on that, and let the judge and let the courts and let the things deal with it. And then as soon as I say that, there's a group of people that are going to listen and say, the court systems aren't fair, Bill. A black person goes to jail much more often and much more severely than a white person goes. It's like, it's like the whole reforming of the whole system. It becomes like this big thing that the need for protection, safety, and security for the environment, and fairness for the life of a victim, and the consideration for the police that is going through this event, and then the community that's traumatized enough to burn down the Wendy's, going like, I don't want to look at that Wendy's again. I don't want to. They have to build something completely new here. You don't put a Wendy's here. And I mean, anyway, so you can see there's a lot of layers here, which is really, really hard.
There's a lot of layers. There's a lot of
very, very problematic.
A lot of complex subjects here, and you're very right, Bill, to give some of them, acknowledgement here, because we don't want to, we can't really take a deep dive down all of those paths today, but certainly there are a lot of considerations. You're right. It's a really difficult no-win situation, perhaps in many ways. And it's again, just terribly tragic and unfortunate that it escalated to the point where the officer, for whatever reason, felt he had to draw his gun and shoot this person. But then, I think for now, Bill, maybe we've shined enough light on that tragic situation.
Well, the accountability now
lot,
has
right?
the accountability now all of a sudden is the next piece to go after, Tom, is because you have the event and all of the different things that need to be worked out with that. And, and then the post-trauma is now transferred to all of the people and all of the different situations in the environment. That accountability, if it's not being met within the letter of the law, then who do we talk to? Where do we, as a civil society, where do we lean our elbow on and go like, okay, at least I can rest here. And the greater social problems that are happening economically inside the environment, it becomes like, well, shall we hold the police accountable? Yeah, partly. and who else are we going to hold accountable?
Well, see, that's where it can get, a little, clearly at some point, this gets from community policing and all those complexities, and that gets into politics. And that's another big rabbit hole. We don't want it to go too far down. But I was struck by how quickly the chief of police in Atlanta stepped down. And the mayor immediately called for the chief of police really to step down.
Right.
And, because I guarantee that, maybe I shouldn't say that. I suspect there may be a lot of problems in the Atlanta Police Department, systemically or some difficulties there if this chief of police stepped down so quickly. But what I was going to say is I really suspect that the chief of police really had no idea that officer would pull a gun and shoot somebody in a situation they shouldn't have. I mean, she didn't know he would do that. And the chief of police had no control over that officer in that moment in being able to prevent him from doing that. So is the police chief really on the hook for this? I mean, I guess as the leader of the police, you have to accept responsibility on the one hand. But on the other hand, my gosh, she didn't even try to be a part of restoration and healing and figuring out what happened.
No, she wasn't. So, but what she did do is meet the need for protection, security, and safety for the department, because there's nobody specifically to talk to. Now all of a sudden the media can't talk to anybody, and it can't get worse. They can't talk about, I don't know, Mr. Mayor, Miss Police Chief. Here are all the violent things that happen to African Americans under your watch. See, that discussion never gets to take place.
So
she's not available now.
So is it a bit of falling on the sword for the department and trying to make it easier to change and heal because the leader is gone now?
Yeah, the head of the giant gets cut off and another head gets sewed on top of the giant's head. It's a weird metaphor to use, but it's sort of the way it happens, because then the giant sort of kneels down and takes a nap, and lays down and takes a nap a little bit. It's like, it still is a giant that, needs to really carry society versus then, kind of like suppress and being funded in that way that it is. The giant, is now the public is saying, but that's not what's happening. What's happening is whatever the body of the organization is still the body of the organization. Even if you take another head and sew it on top of the organization, it's still the organization. Do you see how, it's a weird metaphor to talk about it, but if you and I are going to really honestly talk about what truth looks like, it's the systemic part of the giant, the arms, the legs, the body, the rest of the body, and you just sew a talking head on top of it is not the most powerful way to go. The way to go through it is through the process of restoration and to make meaningful changes to restore how the delicate balance about how the police, and I'm talking, it's delicate, how do you meet the need for safety, protection, security, for an individual at the same time as meet the need for protection, safety, security, and and fairness for society, because you don't want a person that's traumatized going and traumatizing the rest, or another event, and there's all kinds of things when police don't give somebody a pass and they're so drunk they run into somebody and kill a family or something in a car. There's many examples of the too lenient versus too much force. Too much force, too lenient. Too much force, too lenient. And that's tough. It's like, how do you meet the needs of the individual at the same time as meet the need for society? And then we look at the situation and we go like, this is hard. This is hard. This is what adults do. Adult thinking is not black and white thinking, Tom. It's
right.
Shades of gray. That's adult thinking. And that's logical and analytical thinking, is you got to say, okay, the police officer was at the need for protection and it didn't meet the need for life for a person. And that's where the line needs to change for inside the mindset, of a person, that is both, as a police officer as well as society as a whole. Is like, it's a tough job to flip the coin on protection, safety, and security and say, well, you meet the need for protection, safety, security of this person because you shot him. But you may have met the need for safety and protection of somebody in the future, but it's still, the cost is way too high for everybody involved. The cost is too high. Anyway.
Yeah. Well,
and burning down buildings because of it. I mean, it's like,
well, I know, and people think, well, that's not wrong either. I mean, I almost wonder if it's terrible that now some people aren't able to go to work today, and maybe they've lost their jobs because their Wendy's they worked at is burned down. Maybe they can work at another location, maybe not. But you sort of wonder if Wendy's, the organization, would that business have died because no one, even if they didn't burn down the building, would anybody have gone to eat there again? I mean, maybe a lot of the community wouldn't have, and they had to shut down that location anyway. So it's, and I'm not saying it's a good thing the building was burned down, but the community needs to move on in some way from what happened there. Yeah.
Yeah. How can I heal? How can I heal? The amount of furiousness about justice not being met inside the community is showing up in a flaming building.
Right.
That's what that symbolizes, is justice, some form of burning justice. We're traumatized, and I'm not saying it's right. I'm just
you're saying you can see why it happened because of how the community and the people are thinking, and the emotions that are going on, right? I mean, there's a reaction taking place.
Yeah. The exhaustion of trauma inside the Black community is larger than what you and I could ever know or experience.
Right.
And I fundamentally feel sad and distraught about that. And that's why, by the way, the movement has gotten so many people involved, because we have heard now for so many years of the disproportionate amount of people going into jail. And most of us fundamentally at this point in time, that's why the marches are so big, are going like, this is fundamentally wrong for us as a nation to jail this many people. We're the land of the free, and we're the highest jailed per capita country. That's not our identity as the land for the free, and when something's broken, people go like, this is broken. Well, I'm mad as hell about that now. So,
and you can see how complicated this all gets for us as a nation, where, communities are struggling and working through, and police departments in cities are working through how can they be more effective and meet all these competing needs. of, society, of individuals, of the police. Right. And, I think you make some really good points here, Bill, that, trying to have some better understanding of the needs and some compassion and empathy is the path toward restoration. Whereas, more force and dominating the protesters or dominating the demonstrations, as we hear coming out of Washington, is really not in alignment with that, is it?
No, it's not. We're not in a place where I think we have an opportunity to get, the media giant and the government giant to carry us. We're in a position to do that in regards to the law enforcement and the legal system giant over here. And you and I in previous podcasts have talked about these big systems as being giant. They will step on you, or they'll step on a group in a heartbeat. I mean, these systems, the education system, they will step on you. They'll just flat out step on you. If you're yelling at them and you're screaming at them, they step on them. But when there's, 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000, the giant gets scared really quick, and it's not about the one hero that slays the giant that makes the difference. If I want to tell a story about, slaying a giant, it's the community that's needed, in order to get the giant to carry us. It's the need, it's that collective need for protection, the collective need for safety, the collective need for security and fairness and mutuality. A person doesn't have to lose their life, even in this state that he was in, because his fight as he was running away was real to him. His trauma was real to him about the bad thing that was going to happen next as a 27-year-old. And the burden that he didn't know what was going to happen next, and that was his best strategy, is to run. It's the limbic brain doesn't say, the rational brain has no power, especially when it's drunk, to go like, wait a minute, maybe it's better I not take this taser, just sit in the car. It doesn't do that. It really doesn't. So, and very, very sad, disheartening. We're convulsing, or, the trauma is radiating through society, radiating through the U.S. So, and we got to do a better job of not even getting ourselves into that position. If somebody has hope and meaning and a vision for their life, well, they don't use drugs as much. What a surprise. Because they've got something that, I can live within the letter of the law and not, having, the giant step on me, or the metaphor keeps coming of the giant keeps kneeling on people's necks, as if we want to go back to that trauma moment.
Right.
It's like, geez, seriously? Does it need to be this, in our face? And the answer is, well, maybe so. Maybe we need to have this wake up call. And it's just so sad, disheartening. It's just like the loss is radiating. The trauma goes another generation. It's like, we got to stop it. The trauma keeps moving forward to the kids of, that person.
Sure.
So I think, the truth in trauma is a place for us to stick the landing here, because one of the things is, the truth about trauma is that trauma, it doesn't take 6 therapy sessions to get rid of sometimes. That's the reason why I'm putting that joke in there, because many insurance health insurance that says, oh, you want health care? Yeah, we're only paying for 6 sessions. The rest of it's on your own. And it's like 6 hours to fix a societal traumatic problem. I don't think so. It's like, but again, we still have to do with the systemic problem, and we have to deal with all these different moving parts as human beings in a complex society. And it's a little daunting, but there's ways to do it. There's ways to get restoration to take place. Trauma doesn't have to move forward as much as it does.
Well, and it's clear that the wake-up call of all these protests in the wake of the death of George Floyd, and now this latest incident in Atlanta, are causing every state and every city across the country to re-examine a lot of these issues, not only about policing, but about support for the community and other things where money's being spent. And there's a certain amount of restoration that it is going to take place here. Restoration maybe is the wrong word, but change, certainly. There's a lot of change is starting to take place and in the process of taking place, which is I'm long overdue, it would seem. I think it's very clear at this point.
Yeah, the reallocation of funds towards ways to deal with trauma are a great place for us to pick up. It's like, we've got to start facing our inequities, even from the small places, our inequities about how some communities get the internet and some communities don't get the internet. I mean, that affects education, online education. That affects upward mobility. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like trauma. If we don't face the trauma continues. And collectively, we've got to do a better job of, facing trauma and making sure, we're engaged in the process of, the movement of things and keep the, 100 drummers and keep the pressure on until there's the meaningful changes that's needed. I mean, in the or otherwise, the next step is, or the next fall in is to the place of depression, and not the depression of people, and then the depression of economy. Because if the needs of the many are not met, then the needs of few, they're going like, well, it's great, but they're in the wreckage of, the apocalyptic hellscape. It's like, the gated community isn't going to get you there. It's, you're living there, but you can't go to a restaurant without looking over your shoulder. Do you want that to translate? It's like, no, I don't want that. I don't like that society either.
Sure.
So there's a lot to talk about here. I think the truth and trauma is a place for us to stick. What do you think, Tom?
I think that's a good place to evolve to next. That sounds great, Bill. Well, thanks so much for this, very complex, tricky discussion, but I think it was important to have, and I really appreciate it, Bill. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.